This is Unit 8, Lesson 5, Learning Target. I can factor trinomials in the form of a x squared plus bx plus c by grouping. Just so you know, this is standard form. Whatever number is next to the x, even if it's a 1, that is known as a. Whatever number that is next to this x is b, and whatever number right here this is right here is known as c. So this is called standard form. All right, and that is something that we are going to refer to later on. So the do now says factor those three, and then the Regents prep is right here, but just do 1, 2, and 3 for now. Press pause and try them out. So number 1 is the difference of squares. Hopefully you did realize that coming in to the question, looking at it, that is a perfect square, that you have 49 right there. So what times what equals a negative 49? Well, the first thing I do put down is x times x, because that is x squared. And once I put that down, I am going to put 7 and 7, because 7 times 7 equals 49. And 1 has to be plus, and 1 has to be minus. And that's basically every time that you have the difference of squares. You're going to see that so much. So for number 2 is not the difference of squares. You notice that there's an a b, and a c. So you have to kind of just go through what factors equal 100 that you can multiply, they could use to multiply to 100 and then add to 20. So add or subtract to 20. So the first thing I think of in my head is 100 times 1. And 100 times 1 you cannot use to make 20 in any way, adding, subtracting. Then it's 50 times 2, and I'm working my way down. 50 times 2 cannot be used to make 20. 25 times 4 can also not be used to make 20 if you add or subtract them. But I know that what comes to mind is 10 times 10, and that can be used to make 20. So I am going to put 10 and 10 right here and right here. Since I have to multiply to a positive, it's either positive times positive or negative times negative. Now, since I have to add to a negative 20, that means both of them will be negative. Negative times negative is positive. Negative 10 minus 10 is negative 20. That is your answer. So for number 3, hopefully you did kind of take a look at this, and every time that I see this is a negative 1, anytime that I see that, I might have numbers that are consecutive. It doesn't mean that it has to be that way, but so let's go and see. I know 30 times 1 will not make 1 if I add or subtract them. 15 times 2 is not something that you could use at all to make 1. 10 times 3 is something that cannot be used to make 1. And then 6 times 5 can be used to make 1. So I'm going to put that down, 6 and 5. Since it has to multiply to a negative number, that means that I have to have 1 positive times 1 negative. And 6 and 5, if you look at it, to make that equal negative 1, it would have to be a negative 6 plus 5. So basically, just like this, and you are finished. Negative 6 plus 5 is negative 1. Negative 6 times 5 is negative 30. Which value of C would not make x squared plus 10x plus c factorable. So the way I would just do this is to actually substitute each one of these numbers and try to factor it in. All right, so press pause, but just put x squared just to get you rolling, plus 10c, put 10x, and then plus 25. Since, by the way, this is a little bit, I mean, it's an annoying question, but thing is, it's a little bit easier. Thank goodness, it's all positives. So you know when you're setting up each one of, let me just put this down, plus, just like that. Just like that. All right, you can put the signs in right away. I usually don't put the signs in, but for anything that is just all positives, nice and easy. All right, so I'm just going to put those signs in. Go ahead, press pause right now, and we'll come back, and hopefully you did get the answer. Press pause now. So I have everything set up, and I have everything substituted in. So I'm going to look for factors that multiply to 25 that add to 10. All right, and now we're dealing with all positives here, so 5 and 5, that works, and it's 5 times 5 is 25. 5 plus 5 equals 10. We can move on to the next one. Two factors that equal 24, that when you multiply them and add to 10 is 6 and 4. So 6 plus 4 equals 10. 6 times 4 equals 24. That works. This is out. This is out. Those are factorable. Now 21, 7 times 3, or 7 plus 3. So 7, 3. That works. That's out. Let's see. 6 and 3. 6 times 3 is 18, but it's not 10. It's 9. So 18 times 1, 9 times 2 is 11. Can't make 10 out of it. This is the one that is not factorable. D is your answer. So prior knowledge necessary for factoring by grouping, and this is going to take a little bit of getting used to. When you're factoring a trinomial where a equals 1, and when I said the a is right before that x, that's the one that they're talking about. They never will write it, so just remember that that is a 1, and I'm just going to get that out of there just because I don't want you to get used to putting a 1 there. All right, so a is 1, and you just basically go ahead and put them into binomials and factor them out. You don't need to do anything else. But when there's an a that is greater than 1, sometimes you would have trouble. And taking a look at the example, there is no greatest common factor you could even pull out. In this one over here, in this example, there is a greatest common factor that you could pull out. 4 is the number that is the greatest common factor that goes into 8 and 20. And also, both of these terms have an x that you could pull out. But for this one, this example, you do not have anything to pull out, no greatest common factor. That's when you know that you have to factor by grouping. So I would suggest copying these steps down. Just make sure that you have an idea of why you have to do it this way, and it's basically the easiest way to go about it. It's called factoring by grouping. All right. So if you have no greatest common factor to pull out, nothing that you could do, and this number here is a larger than 1 number, it's very, very difficult to factor this without factoring by grouping. So the first step is to ask yourself, can I pull out a greatest common factor? The answer is no in this case. Step two is to multiply A and C. And when I'm saying multiply A and C, I'm saying to multiply the 4 times negative 70. All right, so we're going to just multiply that 4 times negative 70, just like that. All right, and we get, when you multiply 4 times negative 70, use your calculator to do it. Obviously, these are not easy numbers. This is negative 280. All right, and that is step 2. For step 3, you have to find factors, 2 factors of A and C that add to what B is. All right, you have to find factors. Since you already multiplied 4 times negative 70, now you have to find factors that add to B. All right, find the factors that add to B. In this case, you have to find 2 numbers that add to negative 280. So that might take you a little time because negative 280 is not like a normal number. But the first 2 factors that I could think of, and I'm going to write them down here. I'm going to just move this over. The first 2 numbers I'm thinking of are negative 10 and 28. All right, negative 10, but remember it has to be a negative, has to be a positive 33, right? So I'm going to think of C negative 10, maybe plus 28. And that's 18. So that's not going to work. Remember, I have to have a positive 33. Sorry, that adds to, sorry, 33. So you're looking for numbers that add to 33 in this case. So negative 10 plus 28 will not work. So I'm going to move on to the next 2 numbers. And I'm going to go to, I think, let's see. You're definitely going to need your calculator for this. So the way you could probably do this is that you're talking about 280 here, right? Yeah, you're using those factors of 280 and you're listing all of them, 10 and 28. Yes, that multiplies to 280, and so does this. But the thing is, these 2 numbers you can't use. So you're just talking about 280, and now you're going to have to go, all right, what goes into that? And I knew 10 went into it. What about 5? 5 goes into it. Okay. So 56 times 5 also equals 280. But can you make 33 from those 2 numbers? Absolutely not. All right, so that's not a good, those aren't good numbers. So 280, you're figuring now, I'm going to go to, let's try 280 divided by 40. All right, so, oh, okay, so 40 times 7 equals 280, and then you could get 33, a positive 33, by doing 40 minus 7. So 40 and a minus 7, that equals 33. So we basically have your two factors right here. So that's a really difficult thing, because 280 was pretty difficult to see exactly what the factors are of 280. It's not like an easy number. All right, so it's not a common number. And then you had to see, all right, you have to pick those two factors that multiply to 280 that also add to 33. And we did it. It's 40 and a negative 7. 40 plus negative 7, or 40 minus 7. So the next step is to rewrite the trinomial using your two factors. All right, and the way this is going to work is that these are the factors right here that you're looking at. So when you rewrite them, this is now going to be 4x squared plus 40x using your factors. See that 40 minus 7x, again using this negative 7 as a factor, minus 70. Okay, so let me just explain. You see this 4x squared? That's just coming down. See this 33x, this positive 33x? You just split it up. See this 40x minus 7x? That is 33x. That's what this is. So you didn't change it. You're not allowed to change it, but you're changing it, but it's not like you're changing the original trinomial. All right? This does equal 33x. And then you bring this negative 70 down. When you're doing step 2, you're multiplying the a times the c. And you're figuring out, all right, this is negative. When you multiply the a and the c, that's negative 280. And you have to find out factors that multiply the negative 280 that also add or subtract to 33. And that's what step 3 is. Now step 4 is to rewrite. Once you find those factors, you have to go ahead and bring down the 4x squared, and now b, that whole b, is not 33x anymore. It is 33x, but it's split up. It's 40x minus 7x, which is 33x, and you bring down that negative 70. All right, so now what you do is step 5. So step 5 is to factor each part. So this is basically you're splitting them before you factor them. So I'm just going to write that down, split before factoring. All right, so when I mean split, you see this part right here with these first two terms? You're going to factor that, the greatest common factor, out of that. Then you're talking about the second two terms, then you're going to factor the greatest common factor out of that. So just looking at the first two terms, what is the greatest common factor that is within those first two terms? Well, it's a 4. 4 goes into 4, and 4 goes into 40. And then x squared and x, the greatest common factor is x that you pull out. So that's 4x. Now 4x times what equals 4x squared? 4x times x equals 4x squared. And 4x times what equals 40x? 4x times 10 equals 40x. Now you have a second set of parentheses, and you are going to factor out in the second pair of terms. So we are going to factor out that negative, and we're also going to look at the greatest common factor, that it is definitely a -7 that you could factor out. -7 times what equals -7x? -7 times x. And then -7 times what equals -70. -7 times +10 equals -70. Do you notice that you have inside the parentheses um, the same binomial? That's how you know that you're correct. Once you get this one, it should be the same as this one. If it's not, then maybe you made a mistake. So this is basically what you do. You're just going to take this first 4x minus 7, first binomial, create your first binomial, 4x minus 7, just like that. And then you're going to use that x plus 10 as your second binomial. And those are the steps to factor by grouping. It's a little bit difficult. You'll get the hang of it, and we'll go through a couple more. But to check it, you do have to FOIL, all right? Do distributive property. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times 10 is 10 positive 10x. -7 times 10, sorry, negative 40x. Sorry, positive 40x. And then -7 times x is -7x. And -7 times 10 is -70. When you combine like terms in the middle, you have 40x minus 7x. Look at, you have it right here. All right, so this is correct. It will come out to be 40x minus 7x is 33x minus 10, and you bring down the 4x squared, and you have your answer. Your answer is correct of the two binomials. Right here. That's your answer. Just so you know. You wanted to factor, you started out wanting to factor something that did not have a greatest common factor. It did not have anything to pull out. So that's exactly why that you went to factoring by grouping. So to review the steps, I see an example like this. There is no greatest common factor. I have to multiply A and B and C. Once I multiply A times C, I get another number, whatever that number is. I have to now take this number and look for two more factors that add or subtract to the middle number right here, which is B. Once I find that, and it's 40 minus 7 that equals 33, then you go ahead and you split. You write down your trinomial using those factors in the middle as B. So keep in mind, whatever factors that you are splitting and that you're writing in the middle, it really should, or it has to, equal that 33x, and it does. I bring down the A. Don't change it. Then I use the 40, put an X after it, because remember, you're talking about two numbers that add or subtract to 33x. This right here is minus 7x, 33x, 40 minus 7, and then bring down the negative 7. When you do that, then you have to factor out the greatest common factor. Once you factor out that 4x and you factor out this negative 7 right here from this, you realize that inside the parentheses is the same binomial. That is always part of your answer right there. Then 4x minus 7 right there. That is your answer, and you just check it using FOIL. So this page right here is the same exact thing as what we just did, step by step, showing you that you could use it. By the way, just want to tell you that this is not how we set it up. It doesn't matter how you set it up though. You could see how like this, what is done on this page. See this negative 7 is first and the 40 is second. We had it in reverse, but it's okay. You could still write 4x squared minus 7x plus 40x, and then factor it out. It's still going to be an x plus 10 times 4x minus 7. Right? So you're still going to get the same answer. It doesn't matter if it's written like, it doesn't matter which way you write it. All right? The order of the factors does not matter. All right? And that's basically it. And this is the way that we did it. Putting the 40 first, the 40x first, and then the negative 7 second. Either way, it adds to 33, and that is it. So here's an example, a much easier example, by the way. All right, so go through your steps, and we'll go through them together, and we're going to say step 1. Multiply A and C. And by the way, the step 1 that I had down was to actually take a look at it and see if you have a greatest common factor that you could, take out. You do not have a greatest common factor here, so that means that you have to factor by grouping. Or you should. Much easier to factor by grouping. All right, so we're going to take 2. We're going to multiply 2 times 10. And we are going to get 20. So you have to look for two numbers that multiply to 20 and that add to 9. Since this is all addition, so you're looking for two numbers that multiply to 20 that add to 9. So 20 times 1? No. 10 times 2? Nope. And 5 times 4? Well, this works. This adds to 9. So as soon as you have your factors, now I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go to, all right, so now 2x squared. I'm going to bring that down. Remember? Now, see this 9x? I'm going to put this plus 5x. I'm going to split that 9x up. I have my two factors. Plus 4x. Remember, 5x plus 4x equals 9x. You didn't change it. And then just bring down that 10. And all right, so now I have the front part right here, the two terms, and I have a back, like the second two terms right here. So either way, I'm going to just try to get the greatest common factor out of those terms, right? So let's see if I could do that. I know I'm going to have to factor this twice, so I'm going to set up my parentheses right here and here. So what is the greatest common factor? And I'm only looking at the first two terms. My greatest common factor is only x. That's it. 2 and 5, there's no number that both of those numbers go into. So what times x equals 2x squared? What times x equals 2x squared? X times 2x equals 2x squared. What times x equals 5x? 5. Now, just so you know, once you really get good at it at this, uh, you you know, see this 2x plus 5? It should be here as well, if I'm doing this correctly. But so let's just go ahead and see if we can get a greatest common factor out of the second pair. 4 and 10, I know that 4 doesn't go into 10, but 2 goes into both. So I'm going to put that as a greatest common factor. What times 2 equals 4x? 2x. Notice that it's so far so good. And then 2 times what equals 10 plus 5? Okay, so last step, put them together. X plus 2 in parentheses times 2x plus 5. If you FOILed them, if you did distributive property, you would get this. That's that question right there. All right. My page might look a little bit different than yours. It's because I spread it out because I need a little bit of space here. So I'm just going to do this first one with you and see if you could do the second and third on your own. All right, so the first step right here is to see if you have a greatest common factor. You do not have a greatest common factor. So you have to multiply this A. You're going to factor by grouping. You're going to multiply A times C. So the first thing that I'm going to put down on the page is 2 times 2, and I am going to get 4. Now I have to look for two numbers that multiply to 4. I'm sorry. I have to look for two numbers. This is 4. That multiply to 4 and that add to 5. So I'm going to go over here and say, all right, so 4 times 1. Okay, 4 times 1. Multiply to 4, add to 5. So I'm going to go and rewrite. I'm going to bring the 2y squared down. And see this 5y? It's now going to become, because I have 4 and 1 that add up to 5, it's going to become 4y plus 1y, which is just y. Bring down the plus 2. Once I get to that, I am going to put, since I know I have to get my greatest common factors out, and that might be a little bit too much space, but go a little bit in there. There we go. All right. My greatest common factor, and I'm going to change the color here just to let you understand, just hopefully show. All right, the greatest common factor of 2y squared plus 4y. I am not going to look at these yet. All right, so I have 2. Greatest common factor is 2. And I also have y as the greatest common factor. So 2y times what equals 2y squared? Y. 2y times what equals 4y? 2y times 2 equals 4y. Greatest common factor here, there is none. So I'm not gonna put anything out there. I'm just gonna put y plus 2 inside those parentheses. Notice that inside the parentheses are the same. All right, so 2y, by the way, what's here though? What's here? It's a 1. You want to put that 1 there, okay? But you do have to have something here. 2y plus 1. Remember, it has to be binomial. And this is y plus 2. You go ahead and check it. Multiplication, but it works. You have 1 times 2. 2y times y is y squared. 2y times 2 is 4y. This is 1y, and this is 2. It's just like this right here, distributive property, and you'll get your answer. Take a look at number 2. I'll do that one with you as well. So you have no greatest common factor. No greatest common factor that can be pulled out. So that's how you know you have to factor by grouping. So you factor by grouping a times c, right? So 5 times a negative 3. All right, 5 times negative 3 equals negative 15. But now you have to pick two factors that add to negative 15. And the first two that I could see is you have to pick two factors that add or subtract to negative 14. And the first two factors, and that multiply to negative 15, well, you get negative 15, negative 15 times 1 equals negative 15. Negative 15 plus 1 equals negative 14. All right, so now I multiplied a and c to get negative 15. Then I have to pick two factors that multiply to negative 15 but that add to negative 14, and that is negative 15 and 1. So I am going to bring down the 5d squared. I am going to split up, since I know that negative 15d plus 1d equals negative 14d, then I know basically those are my factors. Now I am going to factor out. First set, 5d squared minus 15d. So obviously 5d is the greatest common factor there. 5d times what equals 5d squared? 5d times d equals 5d squared. 5d times what equals negative 15d? 5d 5d times negative 3 equals negative 15d. Now there's no greatest common factor here. I'm going to put a 1 though. because it is definitely a 1 outside that parentheses. Need that. And then put the d minus 3 inside. So when you do put this together, you have 5d plus 1 inside parentheses, and then times d minus 3 inside parentheses. And that is your final answer. Go ahead, press pause, and try number 3. All right, steps right there in front of you. Just go ahead, try number 3, press pause right now. So I did 2 times 2 equals 4, and now I have to look for two numbers that multiply to 4 but that add to a negative 5. So 4 and 1. 4 times 1 equals 4, and negative 4 minus 1 yep minus 1 equals negative 5. So I'm going to rewrite this. The 2x squared comes down. The negative 5x is now going to be negative 4x minus 1x, and I'm going to bring the plus 2 down. Now, again, I am going to find the greatest common factor of the first two terms, and that is 2x. 2x times what equals 2x squared? 2x times x equals 2x squared. 2x times what equals 4x? 2x times 2 equals 4x. Then I am going to bring out the 1. Negative 1 times what equals negative 1x. Negative 1 times what equals a positive 2. Negative times a negative equals a positive 2. Sorry, that's a bad 2. And that looks like what your answer is going to be. 2x minus 1 inside the parentheses. Sorry, my hand is getting a little bit hard to write like this. 2x minus 1, and then inside parentheses you notice you have the same thing as I said before, x minus 2. And that's basically it. Okay. All right, so we have 3 more problems right there. Go ahead, see if you can do them. Take it step by step. We'll come back with the answers. Press pause now. Okay, so 6 times 7, 42. You have to find two factors that multiply to 42 and that add to negative 23. Right? So negative 21 times negative 2 is 42. Negative 21 minus 2 is negative 23. So I'm going to bring down the 6n squared. And then I'm going to bring down negative 21n. And I'm going to use this negative 2n. Remember, negative 21n minus 2n is negative 23n, and just bring down the 7. So when I get the greatest common factor, and I'm looking at 6 and 21, I'm going to try to think of a number that goes into both, and I see that 3n does. 3n times what equals 6n squared 2n. And 3n times what equals negative 21n, 3n times 7. Any factors here, I'm going to bring this negative 1 out. Any greatest common factors here? Nope. So you're just going to rewrite 2n, because negative 1 times 2n equals negative 2n, and negative 1 times what equals positive 7. Remember, it has to be a negative times a negative, and you should have the same uh, binomial inside the parentheses. You have 3n minus 1 in the parentheses. You have the 2n minus 7. And that is your answer. Go ahead, do the next one, see if you can start it. Hopefully you can, and press pause. So we have you have to find two factors. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. So you have to find two factors that multiply to negative 6 and that add to 1. So I'm just going to take, all right, negative 6. Negative 6 times 1, negative 3. 3 times 2 can add to 1. All right, but this has to be a positive and this has to be a negative for that to happen. All right, so positive 3 times negative 2 equals negative 6, and 3 minus 2 equals 1. So there are my factors that I have. So I'm just going to rewrite 2n squared plus 3n minus 2n and a minus 3. When I go to factor out, I'm going to factor out a 2n. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to factor out an n. Because that's the greatest common factor. And then 2n. N times 2n is 2n squared. And then n times 3 is 3n. I'm going to factor out nothing. So 2n plus 3 again. And again, the reason why this is a 2n plus 3 is negative 1 times 2n equals negative 2n. And negative 1 times positive 3 equals a negative 3. And you have n minus 1. And you have 2n plus 3. And that is my answer. Go ahead, try number 6, press pause now. So, very difficult right here because the numbers are like this. It is very difficult. You have to find two numbers that multiply to negative 180 and add to negative 31. So, I am going to start with a 180 times 1. And 180 times 1, uh, you cannot make 31 out of that. 90 times 2, again, can't do anything with that because it has to add to a negative 31. Um, then you would have 60. I'm just looking, see this 18? 60 obviously goes into that. 60 times 3, right? Because 6 goes into 18. Um, and then I would just see if 60, 40, maybe 45. Let's see, 180 divided by 45, because 50 is not an option. Okay, so 45 times 4. I'm just looking for factors. 45 times 4, I still can't get to 31 with that. And then, so 30, let's see, 180 divided by, and you could try all numbers, but you're working your way down. All right, oh wait, 36 times 5. And by the way, you know that 5 goes into 180. So if you took 180 divided by 5, you would get 36. And 36 and 5, you can clearly make negative 31. So how would it be negative 31? Well, it would be a negative 36 and a positive 5. Negative 36 plus 5 equals negative 31. Now I'm going to rewrite, I'm going to bring everything down. This is 20p squared. Not an easy problem here. Minus 36p plus 5p. You notice that negative 36 plus 5 is negative 31. That's exactly what you want here, and then just bring down to negative 9. Time to factor out. So looking at the first two terms, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller because I don't have much room. Looking at the first two terms, I am going to look and I see that each one of these numbers, 20 and 36, have greatest common factors. 20 obviously doesn't go in to 36. Neither now going down, um, uh, going down. So you got to figure. All right, 15 doesn't go in. See, 10 doesn't go in. 5 doesn't go in, and you're just trying to find a greatest common factor. So 4 goes into 20. All right, and then also 36 divided by 4 is 9. So 4 works. And then P is a greatest common factor because it is part of both terms. 4P times what equals 20P? That is 5P. 20P squared. And then 4P minus times what equals 36P? That is 9. So this would be a plus 1, and this is 5p. 1 times 5p equals 5p, and 1 times negative 9 equals negative 9. You notice that you have the same binomial in the parentheses. So this is 4p plus 1 as the one of the binomials, and next one is 5p minus 9. And there we go again. And hopefully you are getting the hang of it. I know it is a difficult process, but that's basically it. Go ahead and give this challenge section a try. To do this, you're basically going to have to really, it's just saying to factor this. All right, so you do 8 times 5 first, and you just go through like we normally would, and that's it. Press pause and we'll come back with the answers. This first challenge is pretty easy. 8 times 5 would be 40, and then 20 times 2, it could make 22. 20 plus 2. Everything is positive, so it makes it a little bit easier. Just write down the 8 squared, and then you put the plus 20x and the plus 2x for the 22x, because those are your factors, and then you just bring down the plus 5. So the dimensions, when you go ahead and you factor them, you're going to put the 8x on the outside, because you're going to factor that out of the first two terms. 8x times what equals 8x squared. 8x times x equals 8x squared. And look, I stopped myself here because look, 8 cannot go into 20. So if you ever do make a mistake like that, like I just did, then you can't do it anyway. So the 8 is not a part of the greatest common factor. So let's talk about, all right, if 8 is not, that means 4 can go in. So I'm going to take 4 out. 4x times what equals 8x squared, 2x. 4 times what equals 20x, 5. Notice that I stopped myself because I knew that it was impossible. 8 does not go into 20. So there's no greatest common factor between 2x and 5, so I'm going to put a plus 1 and then 2x plus 5. And you see your answer. These are the dimensions of the floor, the dance floor. 4x plus 1 and 2x times 5. 2x plus 5. And those are my answers for the first challenge problem. Try to take the second challenge problem and do it. Press pause now. Okay, so the first thing that you have to do is 2 times 10. So you would get 20. And it's asking for what values can t be? All right, so you just have to list the factors that multiply to 20, and that's it. So, and it's all positive, by the way, so you don't have to worry about that. So 20 times 1, 20 and 1, since it's all positive, can make 21 if you add them. And there are others. 10 times 2 would also make 20, and 10 plus 2 will make 12. So it could be 12x. Or it could be 5 times 4, and that's 5 plus 4, and it could be 9x. So t could be these numbers. All right, and that is that for that. So for the fast finishers, you can go ahead and do them if you would like. I'm going to post the answers. Just press pause now. So these are the answers. You could press pause and see if that you were correct if you did try them. So these are challenging questions. And remember, every time that you do have a greatest common factor, go ahead and factor that out as first. But these are very difficult questions. These are the fast finishers. You can press pause and just take a look at the answers, see if you were correct, if you were wrong. And that's about it. Going to number 7, 8, and 9. Go ahead and try. Give it a shot. Just remember, if you have no greatest common factor, just go ahead, multiply 7 times 10, and you get 70. And you're looking for factors of 70 that add to 19. And since this is all positive, pretty easy to do. All right. So, but 70 is what you have to find the factors of that add to 19. So that might be a little bit difficult. I usually start with 70 times 1, and that doesn't work. And then 35, half of 70 is 35 times 2. I usually use my calculator for this. And then I would take 70 and try to divide it, let's see, 70 divided by 3, and see if that goes in. No, it doesn't. 70 goes, 5 goes into 70, so I would do this. Okay, so 14 times 5, and I got it. So you just have to know multiples. Just try numbers in your calculator. Just don't sit there and think about it. It's not going to come to you. All right. If like you 70, I'm not really sure what two uh, numbers multiply to 70 that add to 19. But now I have them. I have 7 now. Just going to copy this down. 7y squared plus 14y plus 5y plus 10. Then you could go ahead and find the greatest common factor, 7y, of the first two terms here. And 7y times what equals 7y squared is y. 7y times what equals 14y. That's 2. 7y times 2. The greatest common factor of the second two terms appears to be 5. 5 goes into 5, and 5 goes into 10. Remember, it should be y plus 2. 5 times y equals 5y, and 5 times 2 equals 10. So that is correct. You have 7y plus 5 in parentheses, and then the y plus 2 in parentheses as your answer, and that is it. Go ahead, try to do numbers 8 and 9. Press pause now. All right, this one had a little trouble finding the factors. All right, so negative 48, then I started listing, and then I realized, all right, something is missing here, 16 and 3. That is what would make 13, and it would be a positive 16 and a negative 3 to multiply to a negative 48 and to add to a positive 13. So if you have 2x squared, you're going to put that 2x squared down, and hopefully you did try this already. That's why I asked you to press pause. And you have plus 16x, and then a minus 3x, and that does equal 13x, positive 13x, and then bring down that minus 24. When you go ahead and you factor out, you're going to factor out of the first two terms. You're going to factor a 2, and you're going to factor that x, the greatest common factor. 2x times what equals 2x squared? 2x times x equals 2x squared. And 2x times what equals 16? 2x times 8 equals 16. You're going to take this negative, and the 3 is obviously coming out there because 3 goes into both numbers. So negative 3 times what equals negative 3x, that's x. And negative 3 times what equals positive 8. Negative 3 times what equals negative 27. That is a positive 8. Negative 3 times 8 equals negative 27. So as your final answer, you have 2x minus 3. And that is times x plus 8. And that's it. Press pause for number 9. Press pause now. Okay, so I had 6 times 4 is 24. Then I started looking for factors that multiplied to 24, but just added to negative 11. And if I have negative and negative, that is a positive, and negative 8 minus 3 equals negative 11. So this is how I'm going to put that down. 6n squared minus 8n minus 3n and plus 4. That's an n. And plus 4. So you're going to factor out. Is there a number that goes in? Greatest common factor. 2 goes into both, and then n is going into both too. 2 times what equals 6, that's 3, and n times n equals n squared. 2 times what equals 8, well, that is 4. And then you bring the minus sign out with the 1, because there's no greatest common factor, and inside you're going to have negative 1 times what equals negative 3n. Negative 1 times 3n equals, I guess I can't draw n's anymore, causing a problem. And then minus negative 1 times negative 4 equals positive 4. So we have 2n minus 1 with parentheses, and we have 3n minus 4. I'm going a little bit crazy here as your answer. All right. Go ahead, try to do these 3. I'm just going to give you the answers. Press pause right now, and I'll have the answers there for you. Okay, the extra practice number 10 is 5u minus 7 times u plus 1. Again, you just multiply 5 times negative 7, so for negative 35, you're looking for two factors that add to a negative 2, and that is 5 and negative 7. So just follow along, and those are your answers. Number 11, um, 18 times 4, a little bit more difficult with the 72, um, but 24 times 3 are the factors that you can make 27 if you add them up. All right, it's a negative and a negative. Just follow along and see if we can do that. And number 12, hopefully you got 3p plus 1 times p minus 7. Again, 3 times negative 6 is negative 18, and you have to find two factors that multiply to negative 18, but that add to negative 17, and that's easy. That's an easier problem. Negative 18 plus 1 equals negative 17. Factor out, you get your final answer. All right, Regents, questions that you should really focus on, that uh, definitely listen. There's a couple of different ways that you could do these. Since you have multiple choice, you could just go ahead and use distributive property. Uh, but I don't like to do that because again, you sometimes will come out with the same answer if it's not factored correctly, and they give you one of those things. Sometimes they do that on purpose. So try to do them step by step. Like multiply the 4 and the negative 3, and then look for those two factors and stuff like that. Go ahead and see if you can do it, and press pause now. So I found my factors pretty easily. 4 times 3, 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Then I had to pick two factors that add to a negative 11. And negative 12 plus 1 would be negative 12 plus 1 would be negative 11. And that's basically pretty easy. So I'm going to put down my 4w squared. And I'm going to split minus plus 1w, because negative 12 w plus 1w equals negative 11w, and I'm going to bring down the minus 3. Now I'm going to factor the greatest common factor out, so I know that 4w is the greatest common factor. 4w times what equals 4w squared? 4w equals w. 4w times w. 4w times what equals 12w? 4w times 3, negative 3. And I'm going to factor out a 1 since there is no greatest common factor. 1 times what equals w, and 1 times what equals negative 3, and 1 times negative 3 equals negative 3. So I have 4w plus 1 and w minus 3. And that's it. That's my answer. All right. Go ahead, try number 2 the same way. They just want you to factor. This is area of a rectangle, which can area, blah, 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 blah. All right, so go ahead, see if you can do that. Press pause. Okay, again, pretty easy. 3 times 8, negative 8 is negative 24. Now I have to look for two factors that multiply to negative 24. I'll multiply to 24, and they can make negative 10 when you add them. So 12 and 2. All right, 12 times 2 is 24. Negative, so would be a negative, and a positive would make a negative. Negative 12 plus 2 equals negative 10. So those are my factors, and now I am just going to write down the 3x squared, the minus 12x, the plus 2x. Negative 12x plus 2x equals negative 10x. And then the minus 8. So as you're writing these down, just take a look at those middle terms. It has to equal this when you combine them. So you go ahead and factor out. So 3x is the greatest common factor. 3x times what equals 3x squared? 3x times x. And 3x times a negative 4 equals negative 12x. So now we have a greatest common factor here. This is 2. 2 times what equals 2x? Good. 2 times what equals negative 8? Good. So now I have 3x plus 2 as part of my answer. And also 3x plus 2, 3x plus 2, this is out, this is out. X minus 4. Uh-oh. Did I mess up? No, I'm just going crazy. X minus 4. I crossed them out, and since I'm going delirious, I was looking at the ones that I crossed out. So number 1 is your answer. Pretty easy, not that bad. So take a look at what we have here. 4 expressions shown below. The expression, I would just distribute, right, for all of them. Go ahead and distribute for all of them and see if what you have here. I would do number 1 first. Number 1, if number 1 is an answer, you could cancel out number 2 and number 4. So I would do number 1 first, distributive property, and press pause now. So like I said, number 1 does equal this. So that means number 1 has to be a part of the answers, and 1 and 3. So now you see, notice that 1 and 2 are part of both answers. So I would just look at number 4. 4x times x is 4x squared. Because if this doesn't work, that means 3 is not the answer. 4x times negative 1 is negative 4x. Do you notice that that works so far? And then wait a minute. Okay, so 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times negative 1 is negative 4x. And then this minus 120 just kind of gets put there. And, I didn't originally think that that worked, but it does. So 4 works. I'm not even going to try number 2 because I don't need to. It's not 1 and 2 only. 4 is an answer, so 3 is your answer. Go ahead and try number 4. Again, multiply and see if you can do it. Press pause now. Okay, nice and easy. 3 times 6 is 18. Negative 3, in the same factors. Negative 3, it doesn't happen often. Negative 3 minus 6 equals negative 9. So, nice and easy. You have 3x squared coming down, right? And then you minus the 3x. You put the factors of minus 3x and minus 6x. Yes, that equals negative 9x. And then plus 6. Greatest common factor of 3x out for each one. 3x times what equals 3x squared? 3x times x equals 3x squared. And 3x times negative 1 equals negative 3x. So we have 6 coming out. And negative 6 times x equals negative 6x, and negative 6 times negative 1 equals positive 6. So the answer is 3x minus 6 x minus 1. Wait a minute. Is that correct? No. So I did all that work for nothing. Why didn't it work out? Well, I was hoping for a couple of hands, but look. What does this have that I did not have to do this at first? Okay, it has a greatest common factor. So anytime it has a greatest common factor, don't do that. All right, it's factor by grouping. Um, you don't really have to do it. All right. Could it work out? Yes, it could. But again, take the 3 out, and then that's the greatest common factor. Then you're going to have this 3x squared. And then what times 3 equals 9x? 3x, negative 9x. And then what times 3 equals 6? 2. Okay. So now you could go ahead and set up your binomials with the correct 3's on the outside. 1 and 2 are gone. X and X. 2 times 1, definitely. Just take a look. Negative times a negative. Positive. Positive times a negative. So 4 is your answer. It is negative and negative. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2. Don't jump to conclusions. That's why I did this right here. It is wrong. All right. So just don't go nuts like this and mess it up. You could still get the answer from this, but I just don't want, like, if you factor, I don't want to do it. But you could still get the answer here from this. But again, this is whenever you see, we just got to get you used to, whenever you see a greatest common factor that could come out at first, that's what you do. All right, and then you factor this. All right, it just makes it much easier to do. Again, you could factor by grouping here and then take out this 3 here, and it would become 3x minus 2, and then x minus 1, which is the same answer as we got over there. And that's basically it. That's another bad parenthesis. All right. So like you can go ahead and factor this first binomial out, the 3 out of the first binomial, get the same answer. But I think this is just way more direct, right, to do this method right here. And not that the factor by grouping is wrong. It just takes a little bit, it's a little bit more involved. And that's why you basically wouldn't do it. Go ahead, see if you could figure out these challenge questions. Factor completely. Press pause, and we'll come back with the answers. Press pause now. Okay, so the challenge questions. 2 times negative 3 is what I would start out with, and that's negative 6. And you have to find 2 factors that multiply to negative 6 and that add to negative 1, and that is negative 3 times 2. And then so your answer here is T. These are challenge questions, so you could have 2t squared minus 3t times t plus 1, or you could you could you could put t plus 1 times t 2t to the third minus 3t. I would either one. Okay, so, and number two, you see your answer there, 5 times negative 7. Again, these are factor completely questions, so that means just factor completely, and that's it. Challenge questions, only if you need a challenge there. All right, please do the exit slip and see if you can get your answer. Press pause now. So I got completely lucky with this one. I was like, oh no, another weird number. 7 times negative 15 is negative 105. The first thing that I tried, the first thing I did was bring up my calculator, and I did 105 divided by 5. 5 goes into it, and I just wanted to see if those two numbers, 21 and 5, could make 16, and it can. 21 minus 5 can make 16, and also 21 times negative 5 can make negative 105. So those are my factors that I'm going with. So I am just going to put down 7x squared. Again, I just looked at it, and I knew that 5 went in, and I just took my calculator, divided it by 5, and I knew that 21 times 5 equals negative 105 and adds to 16x. So 21x minus 5x is 16x, and you just bring down that negative 15. Go ahead and factor out now. 7x is the greatest common factor between 7x squared and 21x. So that is 7x times x, and then 7x times 3 would be 21x. 5 is the greatest common factor. And x plus 3. So it would be 7x minus 5 times x plus 3. And what did you pick? Hopefully you picked B, because that is the right answer. B is your answer. 7x minus 5 times x plus 3. It doesn't matter which way you could do it. You could always do FOIL to see if it is correct, but B is your answer. And that ends that very difficult lesson. See you next time.